Okay, I'm going to come back here. So I want to show you one other method. You saw the video, right? Another way to factor trinomials is to use the slip and slide method. And I'm not sure, like I don't think that they've really talked about, I don't think they really talk about this in WAMAP. And I know that when I was in math, this was one of the hardest things. That was a weird E. This was one of the hardest things about factoring trinomials, because we didn't learn it this way. And so I think that's why I like it so much. It's just like, I put an E. It should be slip and slide with just, yeah. Anyway, I like it because it makes a lot more sense to my head. And so that's why I'm showing it to you. Because the way that we learned it back in the day, it never made any sense. And I wish they had showed us this method. So if it's helpful for you in WAMAP, then you have the information and you can use it. So again, let's talk about what he did in the video. So he talked about, this is a trinomial that looks like this, right? And now we have some sort of coefficient out in front of the x squared. So remember over here when we were factoring, we didn't have a coefficient, right? We just had b squared, m squared, x squared. So now we have this number out in front of the x squared. And he gave us the example of 3x squared plus 17x plus 10. And so the first step is to slide the 3 over, right? I'm going to take this coefficient and I'm going to times it by 10. So 3 times 10 is 30. And that gets rid of the x, it gets rid of the 3 in front of the x squared. So now, so that's step 1. Step 2, I factor, just like we did before, right? X and x, and he said the numbers that are times together to equal 30, but add or subtract to equal 17 are 15 and 2. So we have factored it. So now we take this 3 that we slid, that we slipped over, and we're going to make it the denominator. Right? We okay so far? And then we reduce the fractions. So like this one, I have mine in a different order than he did, but that's okay. That one, 2/3 is reduced down as far as it can go, but he said that this one is going to become 5/1. And then our last slide, slip and slide, we slide the denominator in front of the x. So this becomes 1x plus 5 and 3x plus 2. I'm telling you, even though there are fractions involved, and some of you are probably like, there are fractions, I'm out. Seriously, this is so much faster and less painful. I don't even, like I said, I don't even remember the way that I learned it before. So, I like it. These steps are always going to stay the same, so that's why I was writing the steps out. Let's look at an example. So this was from the video. Let's look at an example not from the video. Here's another example. The reason I want to show you this example is that it has kind of one extra step that we can do. 30x squared minus 27x plus 6. So if you notice, I can take 3 out of all of these, right? I could start by factoring a 3 out of all of these. That sounds easy. I want to do that. Okay, so I factored 3 out, so now I have 10x squared minus 9x plus 2, because I divided all of these by 3. And so then now, this is the situation that I need to slip and slide, right? Do you guys remember the slip and slide? Do they still have those? It was like the plastic that you hooked the hose up to, and you could slide on your belly on the plastic. Hopefully somebody knows what I'm talking about. That just occurred to me. Slip and slide is a kid's toy. Anyway, okay. Pay attention, Heidi. We have things to do. So we're going to slide the 10 over, right? So that's our first step. Slide the 10 over. And it's going to be 10 times 2, which is what? 10 times 2 is 20. So then all that's left is the x squared. And I'm going to ignore the 3 for a while. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to come back to it though. I'll remember that it's there. So now I want to factor this. So I've got my x. I've got my x. I know that one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. Actually, no. In order for them to be negative when I combine them, but positive at the end, a negative times a negative is going to give me positive. So if it's negative and then if it's a minus and then a plus sign, I know it's going to be both negatives in here, both minuses. So what numbers times each other? So I'm going to come over here and start listing out some factors of 20 times each other. 2 and 10 have a difference, or I can add them together, a difference or a sum of 9. 3 can't go in. 4 times 5. 4 times 5, right? Because if I have 4 times 5, negative 4 times negative 5, that'll be positive 20. And if I have negative 4x plus negative 5x, that's going to be negative 9x. Haha, we figured it out. Yay for us. Okay. And remember, I still have this 3 that I'm just ignoring the 3 for right now. So now, step 3, I'm going to take the 10 from up here, right? This is from, I'm going to take this 10 that slipped over, and I'm going to make it the denominator. Denominator. Draw a line, put a 10 under it, draw a line, put a 10 under it. And then I'm going to reduce my fractions. So 4 over 10, I can reduce that to, like I can divide 2 out of both of them. So I have 2/5. Right? 4 divided by 2 is 10 divided by 2. And then 5 over 10, I can divide 5 out of both of those. That's going to be 1/2. So let me rewrite this. X minus 2/5 and x minus 1/2. And so then our last step, we slide the denominator. Denominator. I'm spelling it wrong. Minator in front of x. So it's going to go in front of x. So I'm going to have 5x minus 2, and then I'm going to have 2x minus 1. And again, if I FOIL this out and then times it by that 3 that I haven't forgotten, that we factored out from the beginning, I should end up with this. If I FOIL these guys though, I should end up with 10x squared too. So let's see here. Okay, so there's my 10x squared minus 9x. That's what we're going for now. So that was my first. So now I'm going to do my outsides. 5x times a negative 1 is going to be negative 5x. I'm going to do my insides, which is negative 2. Negative 2 times positive 2x will be negative 4x. And then negative 2 plus, or no, just kidding. Negative 2 times a negative 1 will be plus 2. Look at that. So that's 9x plus 2. Look at that, 10x squared minus 9x plus 2. And then I've got that 3 outside, so if I were to multiply it out, look at that, it checks out. I'm going to add that as our 6th step. Check if needed. So again, this is just if you need it, if you don't like the way they show you in WAMAP, you can always use the slip and slide method, because for me, it makes way more sense. Head back over to 10.2, kind of finish the rest of that. And when you're done, come on back and we will talk about 10.3.